Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode here at the podcast. Today, we do have another special guest with us today, and he's going to tell us a little bit about himself and the book that he did author. Do you mind introducing yourself?
My name is David Daniels III. I was born and raised here in the city of Bridgeport. Glad to be here at the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. So, Mr. Daniels, where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I spent most of my youth in a housing project called P.T. Barnum out in the west end of the city of Bridgeport.
Okay, and how was it growing up in P.T. Barnum?
Well, it was different, but I didn't realize how different it was until I grew up a little bit more. I don't think man was made to be living on top of each other, and there's like 10,000 people out there, and all of those families, and all those different personalities, kids everywhere. I thought it was an ideal place to be. I didn't realize until later on when I got older and I saw the drug dealing, the degradation, and all the other bad things that were going on, until I realized that maybe I wasn't in such a normal circumstance.
Okay, and as a kid, growing up in PT, what were some of the things that you were into?
Well, I had a little singing group with some friends of mine. I played basketball, football, baseball. We played city chase. It was like that. Most of the kids out there were pretty athletic, and we spent most of our time, our free time, when we could be outside just playing games. Mostly basketball was my love, but I played baseball, played football, city chase, ring religio, whatever the other kids were doing, that's what I did.
Any fond memories growing up in PT?
Yeah, a lot of fond memories. It wasn't just me. I have 6 brothers and sisters. I had cousins out there. I had friends, lifelong friends out there. So just being there was a blessing most of the time.
Okay, and let's talk about the demographics in terms of diversity and in regards to the area that you lived in.
Well, it's the west end of the city of Bridgeport. There's at that time, it wasn't just a P.T. Barnum housing project. There was housing all around it. When I was very young, they had a drugstore and a grocery store, and it was an old Hungarian neighborhood. There was a trucking company out there. There was a few businesses, cleaners, all of that. So, all of that fell to the wayside over the years, but my childhood was pretty cool. There was a restaurant called the Big Top. Anything that we wanted, community-wise, we had out there, legally and illegally.
Okay, so for those who may not know David Daniels, let's get into David Daniels a little bit. Let's talk about your book, the name of your book.
Okay, the name of my book is Black Blue In Bridgeport. And after about 15 different changes, I arrived at that particular name for the book. For a while, it seemed like every week I was changing the name because I was never really satisfied. An author once told me that the hardest thing to do with a book is to write the last page and give it a name. And those words wound up being kind of prophetic, because it was hard to write the last page and be actually done with it. And it was even harder to write the title. But it came to me one night, and it just fit, because I was black. Well, I'm still black, obviously. But I was blue, and I did come from Bridgeport. So if you take that at its word, it would say, oh yeah, he was a black man that turned blue that lived in Bridgeport. But if you know the story of my career, then black and blue is still apropos, because I got beat up a little bit while I was in there, so it's kind of descriptive. So it depends on how you take it and what you walk away with after you read it.
So blue is in reference to
The police department.
Okay.
On one side.
Okay. And so for those who don't know, that you are a retired police officer here in the city of Bridgeport.
Yeah, I was a Bridgeport police officer for 25 years and 7 months. I started out as a patrolman, and in 25 years I worked my way all the way up to lieutenant, and I retired after 25 years, and now I do a few other things.
Okay, and as a kid growing up, how did the Bridgeport Police Department look in terms of diversity as well?
Well, the city of Bridgeport was incorporated as a city in 1853. It didn't hire its first black cop until 1953. I was born in 1956, so I'm what you would consider like second generation. But the first generation were black police officers, and not many of them. The first hire was a guy by the name of Piper, and he was the only black cop for a few years. The first black cops couldn't drive police cars. The first black cops couldn't arrest anybody white. And the first black cops couldn't make rank. They had to be just patrolmen, and they had to patrol in all of the bad areas. So there was a group that was formulated called the Bridgeport Guardians. Later on in life, I became the president for 10 years, but they were an advocacy group, and they set about suing the city and the police department to make it more fair to the other races and open up the department so that black people could be recruited in larger numbers. Now, when I became a police officer in 1988, I was the benefit of all of those lawsuits, or most of them. But at the time, we had a budgeted strength of 502 cops. We never ever reached those numbers during my whole career. But we did up the diversity. It went from being 99% white to being about 40% white over time. But those numbers have slipped back over the years, and when I left, there was probably like 250 cops. So, there they are. They cut the table of operation to accommodate those numbers, and now they're trying to build back.
Okay, in your book you mentioned there was a moment as a kid when you saw your first black cop. How did that feel?
Oh, it felt awesome. I was out in the courtyard playing with the kids, and the police car pulled up, and there was a black guy in there. He had an afro, and he had his little hat on. It was kind of cool because up until that point, I had never seen a black cop on TV or in the real world. He was soft-spoken. He was very nice to us. He talked to us. He didn't talk down to us. He let us play with his siren. He let us talk on his walkie-talkie. And it left an impression on me. When I saw him, I knew that one day I could be a cop too. I just didn't talk about it because when you're a kid growing up in the projects, that's not the thing to be saying, that you want to be a cop.
And why wasn't that a thing to be saying? You did say that you did have a few encounters. You and people in the community had a few encounters with police officers, which wasn't necessarily the best.
Yeah, well, the thing is that when you've got a police department that's mostly white, and you got a population that they're dealing with that they assume is criminal, they treated black people less than human. And they were always chasing people, snatching people up, beating them up, disrespecting them, and all this other stuff. And then I grew up in the 70s. The Black Panthers were out in PT. There were like social workers and all of this. It was like a hornet's nest sometimes. But I saw the power that cops had, and I wanted that power so that I could do good for the people, because I knew that they didn't have to be treated that way. I mean, the lawless should go to jail. But not everybody's not lawless, and I knew that they looked at all of us like we were criminals when most of us are not. Black people want the same thing white people want. They want good schools for their kids, they want a safe neighborhood, they want upper mobility, and they want a general sense of wellness. And the police department is a part of that, a part and parcel to that, to the harmony in that neighborhood. So I figured with that power, I could reverse some of the stuff that I grew up seeing.
Okay. And growing up in PT Barton, I'm assuming that you went to Bassett High School?
I did. I graduated from Bassett in 1974.
What kind of student were you at Bassett High School?
I wasn't as good a student as I should have been because I was kind of immature. But, I did what I had to do. I graduated, and I eventually went away to college. I had a good time while I was there, probably too good a time. I probably could have gotten higher grades, and I didn't realize the importance of that until I started trying to figure out which college to go to.
So after graduating Bassett, you did go away to college. Which college did you go to?
Well, after Bassett, I went to work for a year.
Okay.
I worked for a year and I got a chance to see what like menial labor was like, and it reinforced the idea that I should go away to college. And then I settled on Norfolk State University in Norfolk, Virginia, because I had cousins there. You know, my mom's brother was in the Navy, so he had family there. So I had a base, a home base. So it was probably one of the best decisions I ever made because I had never been away from home before, and I had to grow up.
And what was your major at Norfolk State?
I was a communications major, and with the emphasis on television and radio production.
And why did you choose that major?
Well, because I wanted to work in television. I wanted to not be on TV, but be involved in TV, like, you know, as a director or a producer or you know, doing voiceovers, you know, something like that.
Okay. Is there anything that you learned at college that still stick with you today?
Yeah, I learned to communicate with people because, you know, PT was diverse in the sense that there were blacks and Puerto Ricans and a handful of whites out there, but that was it. When I went away to college, I met blacks and whites from all over the country and internationally. In order to do things, you had to understand them. You had to learn their moral ways and their folk ways, how they acted, how they spoke, you know, what meant something to them, what didn't mean something to them. I learned how to talk to people and communicate with them and be able to, you know, on the leadership side, to manipulate people and, you know, to get them to do some of the things that needed to be done by more than one person.
Okay. And on one of your trips, returning back from Bridgeport, in your book you said that you and your roommate had got lost in Virginia and got pulled over by the local police. Without giving up too much information, can you speak about the incident that happened and how it made you feel?
Yeah, that was traumatic because, you know, the ride from New York was I had to come home to Bridgeport on the bus, go back to Bridgeport, go back to New York on the bus, hook up with him, and then we had to drive 7 hours. And you know, we got off the highway and we got off at the wrong exit. We were probably like one exit away from where we should have been. And you know, the cops pulled us over and took us out of the car. That was very traumatic because that was my first really hands-on dealing with police. And you know, they treated us like dirt. They snatched us out of the car. They talked really bad to us. They sat us on the curb. They told us to shut up. You know, we were trying to let them know that we were students. You know, we figured that might, you know, make them treat us better, but it didn't mean anything to them that we were students. And they gave us the cliche reason for stopping black people. There was a robbery in the neighborhood, and you guys fit the description. How could you fit a description when you're driving in a car? And after it was all said and done, you know, they told us they stopped us because we were in a car from New York, and we were riding around and around the neighborhood. And I tried to explain to them we were riding around the neighborhood because we got lost. So, you know, it did work out. We didn't wind up going to jail or anything, but, you know, me and my roommate never spoke about that again. We never told anybody that we got stopped. We never discussed it, and we never talked about it again. It was trauma for both of us. And, you know, I thought maybe my roommate maybe had some contact in that regard because he grew up in Brooklyn, New York. But, you know, that was pretty traumatizing for me and him. And I always remembered that when I stopped people, pulled people over.
Okay, so after attending college, you went on to work at SNET,
Yes.
which is a job, many would say is a job security. I believe they have a pension, and at the time you were married with a child.
Yep.
So to many, they would say that you were living the American dream, but for you, there was a void that was missing, that you felt that you weren't doing what you were called on to do.
Well, it was more than a void. You know, I've always had the gift of vision. And in that company, I knew I wasn't going anywhere because I had already got pegged as outspoken. I already got pegged as being militant. And in the corporate world, that doesn't translate into success. So I knew that in order for me to make my assault on this world, it wasn't going to be at the telephone company. So I took the police test because it was something I always wanted to do and just didn't discuss it too much with other people. But I had to tell my wife at that time and my mother that that I had done that. And they had negative responses. They didn't really want me to do it. They thought I was going to get hurt. They thought I was going to get killed. Plus, they knew about the adverse relationship that the police and the community had, because it's right up front and center when you grow up in a housing project. So to assure them, I just said I wanted to see how far I could go, because you take a test, but you have to take 6 other tests. It goes in phases. So after going through all of the phases and getting offered the job, I had to go back to them and tell them that I wanted the job because I wasn't really happy at the telephone company. And I made them some promises that I wouldn't work in narcotics advice and I wouldn't unnecessarily put myself in harm's way, and they agreed to let me try. And I told them that if it didn't work out, I would go back to the telephone company, and I had assurances from my bosses at the telephone company that I could come back. So I felt good about going forward. In a lot of ways, it was exhilarating because, none of it was guaranteed and none of it was easy. So when I actually got to that point, I felt pretty good. But then I noticed very quickly that it was different for me now because everybody was looking at me, everybody wanted to talk to me. I lost friends. Some people didn't trust me. Some people didn't want to be around me. Some people wanted me dead. It was just a different set of circumstances for a guy who was popular. At that time I'm DJing, I'm playing basketball. I got all these friends. We were traveling, we were playing ball, and all of a sudden that world got very, very small. And I didn't think that the job was going to change me or I was going to have to change, but people started changing around me, so I was forced to change to a degree. But I still think that throughout my career, I was able to keep my moral compass intact and the way I saw the world intact, because that job had the ability to change the way you looked at the world too. But I wasn't going to allow my experience to jade me because I liked who I was and I liked how I thought and I liked what I did. So I tried to hang on to my soul.
So, do you recall or remember your first night on patrol as a police officer?
Yeah, I didn't want to go home. I would have worked all night if they let me because it was exciting. You're riding around in this police car, and at the time we had partners because we were rookies. But you get thrown right into the fire. So if somebody gets shot, you're going. If somebody drowns, you're going. If there's a domestic violence call, you're going. If there's a cat stuck in the tree, you're going. And nobody's saying, okay, you just came on a job. You got to prove yourself. You got to prove that you're not scared. Well, everybody's scared, but you got to prove that you're not. And you got to prove that you're willing to do the job. So there's a lot of pressure on you, but at the same time, you don't really have a boss. You get to make the decisions of what goes on during the calls that you're responsible for. So it was different. It was different from anything I'd ever experienced.
What was the reception like for you your first time going back to P.T. Barton in full uniform as a police officer?
Well, it was bittersweet because I had already moved out because I had gotten married, but my mom was still there. But that was the height of the drug dealing era, the crack era. So most of the guys that were out there selling drugs, I knew. I had grew up with them. I had grew up with their mothers and their fathers. And now these kids that were out there were selling drugs. So it was kind of bittersweet. But they knew me, I knew them. I would have some run-ins with them, and some of them would respect me and just walk away when I came. So it was a different set of circumstances, but it was kind of crazy out there.
Okay.
Because you had like 5 or 6 drug gangs out there, selling. This gang had this side of the drive, and this gang had this set of buildings, and this gang was down at the other end, and they were all around the same age. And see, I had watched drug dealing change. Because when I was a kid, all of the drug dealers were older. The older drug dealers were cool. They didn't do anything out in the open. You had to go into apartments and buy drugs. They would not sell to kids, and they weren't violent. These kids, when crack hit, these kids are like 20 of them would run up to a car, and all of them try to sell. They would sell to other kids. They would beat each other up, and eventually they started killing each other because there was a lot of money to be made out there. So it was a different set of circumstances. Some of the kids that I ran across my first year on the job went to jail within 5 years, and I never saw them again. And some of them I didn't see until after I retired. So it was just a different set of circumstances.
So for the most part, everything is going great in your young police career until the day you responded to a call at the train station, and that seemed to change your career and put a target on your back for the rest of your career. Can you tell us a little bit about that day?
Yeah, but we got to back up a little bit because that happened at the beginning of my career.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I had less than 6 months on the job when that happened.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and it was wrapped in racism too. You know, I came to work that day, went out. After I got to my post, which was the North End, I heard that I wasn't hearing much on the radio. So I called our dispatcher and told her, hey, look, I don't know if anybody's been looking for me and calling me, but I think something's wrong with the radio. I'm not getting any calls. So the next voice I heard was a sergeant, and that sergeant told me to come back to headquarters. So I went back to headquarters and he said, hey, you know, they've been trying to call you on the radio. How come you're not answering up? I said, I don't know if you're monitoring the radio or not, but I haven't heard anything. And I said that to the dispatcher. So he said to me, well, you can't go back out in that car. And it just started to rain. He said, you can't go back out in that car. So I'm gonna send you downtown walking. So go get your rain gear. So I went to my locker, got my rain gear, and headed downtown on foot by myself. And on the way, I'm stopping at stores, letting people know that I'm downtown tonight. If they have any problems, they can call me, whatever. You know, just making community contacts. And then there was a call that came in that a police officer needed help over at the train station. So I was kind of the closest cop there because I'm right around the corner, literally at the Hilton Hotel, which is since became the Holiday Inn Hotel, which is now I think it's some kind of housing development. It's not a hotel anymore. But to make a long story short, I run over to the hotel. I see this cop has 2 black guys in handcuffs. And when they saw me, they started protesting their innocence and telling me that they were being arrested for snatching somebody's pocketbook and they hadn't done that. And they were animated and they were, you know, using expletives and all of that. Another cop came from behind me and just, you know, started beating them up. So again, all of that's in the book, and it's right in the book. It's paramount. It's right up front in the book. So if anybody wants to know how that ended, you can read the book. But it changed the whole trajectory of my career. You know, I went from being a popular guy who was on the police force trying to prove himself to being a pariah. You know, nobody wanted to ride with me. Nobody wanted to talk to me, black or white. If you look at the cover of my book, that's a hangman's noose that I'm holding. That was put on my car as a warning, with other warnings that were in the police department that were put on our elevator and all that other stuff. So that changed my whole career. But yeah, that was probably the most traumatic thing I dealt with. And then the aftermath, I had to deal with that for the rest of my career, which was another 24 years and 7 months.
Yeah, in your book, you talked about all the ups and downs that you've been through in your career that was plagued by scandals, allegations, demotion, and fellow officers turning their back on you. But there were some great moments, and if we can speak about 2 of them, the DARE program and the officer-friendly basketball camp.
Yeah, I think those are my, that's my legacy. It got really bad for me on the street, so I had to ask to be taken off the street. And all of that's in the book too, but then I asked could I be allowed to work with children. And at the time, Bridgeport had just gotten a DARE program, which is a drug resistance education program that was started in Los Angeles, California, and made its way across the country that's taught by trained police officers. It's a 12-week program, talks about kids' self-esteem, talks about them not using drugs, talks about the consequences of their actions. That was tailor-made for me. I taught that program for like 8 years. I taught it to all the Bridgeport public schools, to the parochial schools, and eventually to the high schools. I also taught another program called GREAT, which was the same type of program, but the emphasis was on not joining gangs. The Officer-Friendly Drug-Free Basketball Camp I created on my own. That's a program I'm most proud of. That's a program that I ran for 17 years as a police officer. And when I retired, a friend of mine, my right-hand man who just passed away a couple of months ago, he ran it for another 10 years. So that program is still going on 27 years later.
Now, do you feel like all the bad things that happened to you in your career was a blessing in disguise? And the reason I'm saying this is because being assigned to the DARE program, it led you to start the officer-friendly basketball camp. And at the time, they were using this against you as a form of punishment, but it turned out to be something great and rewarding for you.
Well, when you grow up in the projects, you learn to turn every lemon into lemonade. So that was nothing new. You know, I watched my mother raise 6 kids by herself on welfare, and she took good care of us. She did what she had to do. She never complained. She just quietly went about what she was doing. So that was my role model. That's what I did as a cop. I never complained for a lot of reasons, because I didn't want people to know that there was so much disunity in the police department, and I didn't want everybody to know that I didn't have any backing, because I still had to go through my career. So what I did was, everything that they tried to punish me with, I just turned it into lemonade. You know, eventually I started taking promotional exams and working my way up the chain, and they put me in the community services division. I wound up running the community services division over the course of the years. And by running that, I was able to continue the basketball camp, make our community efforts more robust, and I created food programs to give away to people during the holidays. And you know, I used that platform to make our situation better.
And why did you feel there was a need for you to write this book?
Well, the biggest reason I wrote the book is because I wanted to tell my children my story. I've been around a lot of people that think they know my story, and I'm sitting there listening and they get it all wrong, or they leave out a lot. And I shouldn't have to try to correct anybody. So in 1995, I started writing. It's a good thing I did, because there's some things that I probably forgot. There's some things that I probably needed to forget. But I wanted to give that to my children in my own words.
Any words of encouragement for anyone who wants to get into law enforcement?
I have mixed emotions about that. You know, when I first became a cop, I wanted all black men to grow up and be cops or whatever. But I don't think that the profession has changed enough to accommodate us. We need to be there, no doubt about that. But this job is not for everybody. I've seen lesser men crumble. You know, I've seen men that thought they were stronger than me just crumble when they had to deal with one instance. You know, I dealt with 40 instances and they couldn't even make it through one without folding or changing their testimony or backsliding or all that. So this is not for everybody. It's not for the faint of heart. You know, I don't encourage anybody to do it. I don't discourage anybody to do it. That's another reason I wrote the book. If you're curious about the profession and what it's like, as you know, I tell in glaring detail what it's like in the police academy, what it was like as a patrolman, the things that I went through, how I felt about it, what I was thinking at the time in real time. So if you're thinking about becoming a police officer, read my book and see how black officers get treated. Because a lot of people think, well, okay, you're on a job, you made it, everything's all good. No, it's not. You know, white people never wanted us on this job, and they let you know that. So it's like, it's not a fair system. Everybody's not treated the same, and there's a lot of backbiting, and there's a lot of hate. There's a lot of stuff that you're gonna have to deal with every day. So you gotta be built for this. And I'm not saying that like I'm Superman, I'm better than anybody else. I think my saving grace was every time I went through something, I thought that would be it, and it just never was. So, and then naively, that's probably that took me through the whole 25 years. But you know, you really gotta want this, you know, because if you talk to black officers that are being open and honest with you, they're still going through the same things that I went through today.
And where can people go and purchase your book?
That's a good question. I have a website. It's davedanielsii.com. You can purchase it there. You can get it from me personally, and a lot of people like to do that so that I could autograph it for them. You can buy it at Barnes & Noble's bookstore. You can order it online. You can get it on Apple Books. You can get it on a Kindle, and you can also get it from Amazon. So it's available on all platforms, being sold nationally and internationally.
in your book also, there's so much more to it in your book besides of what we talked about in this interview. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to talk about your book into full details, but you do talk about your love for basketball, your love for music, and your love for the community. So I do encourage everyone to go out and purchase the book and read it so you can really get to see who Mr. David Daniel is. So I'd like to thank you for taking your time out to come here on this platform and just share a little bit about yourself. And I really do appreciate the book and also the great service you have been doing here in the city of Bridgeport. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
All right, there you go.